democracy, for the people, by the people, governed by the people. But the truth is, when most people hear democracy, they think it's whoever wins an election and whoever gets the most votes. But democracy is so much more than that, you know? When you think of democracy, you have to think of balance, liberty, equality, and even communication within the community. This documentary will explore activism in the Bahamas. It would also explore equality and the roles of journalism in the Bahamas.
One of the main functions of communication media within an ideal democracy is to provide a platform for public political discourse. Now, the question remains is, who are these contributors to this discourse? Many label themselves as ordinary citizens, while some label them as activists. Activism is the action of fighting for a cause. It's simply that. Now, this can be done traditionally or conventionally. Let's take a look at how the persons that we interviewed became activists within this democratic society.
I don't describe myself as an activist, but other people describe me as an activist, so I don't say no.
I like to think of myself as an activist for equality, and that's on a number of levels.
Being an activist isn't something you actually decide to do. That is something I think that is groomed in you from birth.
Dr. Nicolette Bethel is an anthropologist and also the chair of the School of Social Sciences at the University of the Bahamas. A woman whose family has contributed much to the development of arts in the Bahamas finds herself on a slightly different path: activism. Her journey for equality for all began at an early age and continued throughout her years as a lecturer.
When I was 16, I got a scholarship to go to the United World College of the Pacific in British Columbia, Canada, and that was transformative. It was a college. It's part of a system of colleges, the United World Colleges, that were established originally in the wake of World War II, and the idea was to train young people to work for justice and peace around the world, because the idea was that it was one of those strategies that was being employed to try to avoid war. And so that is the moment, if there were any moments that I would say that I came to a realization that that all the cliches, be the change you want to see in the world, all of that stuff. But that was when it was brought home to me. And then in 1995, I returned as a teacher to that same institution and spent 5 years there. So in all, I spent 7 years actually working within the United World College system, first as a student and then as a teacher. And at those times, it became clear that you can't sit back and wait for somebody else to do the heavy lifting if you want to make change in the world. It just doesn't work that way.
Unlike Bethel, Stephanie Sigfleur did not have such an easy road to activism. Due to the sparks of traumatic experiences in both her childhood and adulthood, the flames of activism were ignited.
When you see people like bullies, anyone who stand up against a bully for somebody, you're an activist, believe it or not. And you would think that we are crazy because it's a thankless job, and it's a job that also have you targeted. And 2014, I did a video that went viral on social media when the immigration bus stopped through Peter Street, and they were picking up women and children, and there was this little baby. The little baby Pampers was soiled, and I asked the officer, I said, sir, could you at least let them change the baby Pampers? And he still took the baby and everyone else and put them on the bus. And that moment, it really crushed me, because I saw myself as any one of those child they were putting on the bus. Because growing up, I remember what my parents went through and seeing, how Haitians were targeted. And in front of me, I was like about 5 or 6, and that's the first time I'm like, what's going on here? And they like grab this guy by his pants and they fling him on the bus. And I'm like, wow. I didn't know what was going on. But 2014 was a reality check for me, and it hurt me to the core. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be the voice for the children who are like me. And so that's how I got involved.
Joseph Gaskin is a sociologist who has been at the forefront of activism not only in the capital of the Bahamas, but also on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Like Sinclair, he finds himself speaking up for the human and equal rights of many individuals within the Bahamian society.
Right. So, I mean, I think of myself as engaging in a number of ways. Primarily, I do a lot of writing, and people think of activists as simply people who go out and protest, which I've done as well, and march, which I've done as well. But for me, the most powerful weapons we have at our disposal as activists is the stories that we tell.
Augusto 2005 notes that storytelling includes telling story as a part of everyday conversation, such as relating first or second-hand life experiences, as well as telling prepared stories to audiences, a great deal of which is based on oral or written literature. Gaskin explains why he uses the method of storytelling in his activism.
Right? Stories are power because if you've taken a sociology class, you know that we provide meaning to every symbol, every object, every person around us through the stories we tell about it. If we have the power to change, alter, navigate, rewrite the stories around us, then we have the power to change our entire reality. That's how I feel about it. And that may sound honky and like, weird, but that's really what this is about.
Koser 1968 developed the Samelian perspective to show that conflict was usually functional in a pluralistic, complex society. In short, the conflict theory shows that conflict can ultimately positively change society, and without it, social ills in pluralistic societies might not change at all. Many, like Nicolette Bethel, agrees with this perspective.
You can't have democracy if you don't have activism. You only have the shell of democracy. Democracy is government by the people. And so if it's called activism, when the people stand up and say we do not agree with the way that we're governed, I call it democracy. I call it democracy at work.
Okay, thanks Joshua for the interviews with the activists in the country. Now I took a look to figure out how do these activists push for equality. Take a look.
Equality in the Bahamas has become a very popular topic in the country. There have been referendums and amendments to laws that help progress equality along in the country. How can a country be democratic if every voice isn't represented, nor do they have the same rights? The xenophobic nature of the Bahamas has left many migrants without the basic human rights, such as education and healthcare.
Wow, we are looked at as enemy number one against the government. When people can understand and see, we're trying to set a pace for people to understand that you have rights. It doesn't matter if you're a migrant. It doesn't matter if you're a child. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter your religious belief. These things don't matter. Everyone have rights. And so, on the topic, final words, you'll note that the Haitian Bahamian community, and I didn't say Haitians from Haiti, but those like myself who were born here, they're very quiet about the abuse. You wouldn't really find much of them reporting things because they're very quiet because they live in fear. They live in fear that they won't get their status. They live in fear because socially, Bahamians of Haitian descent, they are attacked. Whether you have status here or not, as long as you have the Haitian last name, people always look at you and call you illegal. And that culture we have really needs to change. And it should start from the top. Our leaders need to learn how to promote and push more unity instead of division between the Haitian and the Bahamian community. And why I say it's a division is from not allowing people to have that due process when you apply and to respond in a timely manner to make sure that the Bahamians in waiting, those who have no other home but the Bahamas, that they can grow and feel a part of this country that we love, because this is the only place we know as home, you know? So basically, just to our leaders, due process. Give the children who are born here a chance and a fair chance when they apply.
The more people who are involved in decision making, the higher degree that democracy and equality is. However, in the Bahamas, those who can vote are sometimes challenged. Joey Gaskin Jr. explains why that each voice in each community needs to be represented.
And that's on a number of levels, right? So I specifically like to advocate for economic equality, changing the structures of the economy to ensure that everyday Bahamians and everyday people have an economic opportunity at their disposal. I like to advocate for women in particular, and I like to advocate for LGBTQ plus people, and that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer plus people, right? And when I say plus people, that's not a category. I mean including people who are intersex, two-spirited, and all those other things. I'm a firm believer that when our societies are inclusive, we are just better at what we do. When you have more people, a diverse group of people around the table who can help you make decisions, who can engage in the challenges and the problems that we collectively face, we get better answers. And I also believe that inherently as human beings, we all have a right to be respected in a society in which we pay taxes. You know what I mean? And in which we have a compact with each other and our government. Our government is supposed to protect us no matter how poor we are, no matter our gender, no matter our sexuality. And we are supposed to respect each other no matter how poor we are, no matter our gender or our sexuality. And that's kind of the value base from which I operate.
I can call you back. Get my battery running low.
Oh, no, he didn't! Mommy! Jeffrey Jumbly Big Old Rusty Tractor with my battery, but I just done get from Epic.
Jeffrey, why you just do things like that? And you're supposed to be mechanic?
You mean bush mechanic, eh?
I hope you say that when your squeaky brake pads start making noise. Man, keep your battery, man. I going to Epic to buy my own. You better hurry and get this old greasy tractor out this yard.
Epic Batteries, with locations in Freeport, Nassau, Abaco, and Georgetown, Exuma. Epic Battery, the battery with the lightning bolt of life.
Well, as Aristotle puts it, the freedoms of democracy is the glory of the state. There are 4 models of democracy: direct, civic, pluralistic, and administrative. Our research found that there is one reoccurring democracy here in the Bahamas. That's pluralistic. Let's dive in. A pluralist democracy allows more than one group to dominate politics while competing with each other to influence policy. Now, the most notable example of a pluralist democracy here in the Bahamas is the role that interest groups play in political decisions today. Interest groups like Rights Bahamas, We March, and Holla Back all set their own agenda based on their personal interests in an effort to influence policymakers to support their decision. Our team met with Stephanie St. Fleur, president of local activist group Rights Bahamas, who thinks the government blocks human rights groups.
You know, if our government was doing what they're supposed to do, there would be no need for a human rights group. When we vote for our government, we vote for them to represent us straight across the board. Straight across the board. Due process, we want transparency, we want accountability from our government. To me, I think all of the previous government up to date, this is just from me personally. I believe that whenever things aren't going good in our country, if you can look back, to me it's like they use the Haitian situation to capitalize as a distraction for the Bahamian people. WTO coming, this coming, that coming, okay. I've never seen anybody who applied for citizenship. They take that one little notice of the newspaper and all of a sudden now it's all over and everybody see this one person. And we have hundreds who would apply for citizenship. But because it's John Roney, they're making a spectacle of this man and they're putting it and posting it out there. When our government know the truth and they have facts on who he is and they know who he is. You know? And to me, it's like the Haitian situation is a distraction and a band-aid, especially for the xenophobic people, to like, let's focus on this and let's forget about everything else that's going on in the country. Crime is up, unemployment is up, electricity bill is going up. But hey, this Haitian is trying to apply for citizenship. Let's let them focus on this. Like every time something is going on in the country, if you can do your research, anything that's been going on in this country, you will see there's a so-called Haitian situation coming up, or they'll be posting, or we're repatriating the Haitians, or we're doing raids. Look into it.
On the flip side, Joey Gaskins Jr. says the government's receptive to their platforms.
People have this idea, I think, of government and cabinet as like twiddling their thumbs trying to screw you over, right? When they think about, government and they trying to keep us down and all these kinds of stuff, right? I think what people don't consider is that there is the minister and who he is as a person who may be very much aligned with your progressive goals, but who has a constituency with which he has to deal. He has a party whose structure is very restrictive. He's got funders who he's got to keep happy. You know what I mean? And on top of that, he's got 18 other colleagues who he's got to sit in a room with and make decisions with, right? And so there's a constant calculation. It doesn't align with my calculation about why I think that these things are important. It may be important to him personally, but when he sits in that chair as a minister, it may be ignored, or it may be subsumed in all the other things that are going on around him. I don't blame them for that. I actually think we do a poor job of making the issues that matter to us matter to other people. And we walk into the room with this assumption that just because I care about this issue, everybody else should, right? Why should a person who is a male, heterosexual, and Christian care about someone who is female, queer, and an atheist? They live on totally opposite, sides of the spectrum in our society. And even understanding the issues and challenges that that person goes through may be difficult. We as activists have work to do. We see the world changing around us and we believe, well, everybody should just fall in line. But people forget that the movements whose fruits are bearing now have 50 years worth of work behind them, where they were educating and changing things and on the ground in court cases and these kinds of stuff. And we just, in a lot of ways, activists just refuse to put in the work.
Now, democracy doesn't necessarily have to refer to the state and the citizenry. In fact, Arecia Hepburn, an executive member of the Union of Tertiary Educators of the Bahamas, finds that the university constantly undermines the union, and on November 21st, enough was enough.
Negotiate! 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 Negotiate!
A handful of union members met at the entrance of the University of the Bahamas to send a strong message to the school's administration.
It is therefore with extreme concern and dismay that we report on the status of the institution, informing you, the Bahamian people, that all is not well with this university. The administration brazenly convenes the laws, policies, and practices, and even openly declare that the signed and registered industrial agreement is no longer binding on UTEB, despite the terms and conditions being legally vested in faculty. They continue to blatantly violate the same. Negotiations for a new industrial agreement started on February 19, 2018. However, faced with the university's refusal to negotiate in good faith, UTEB found it necessary to suspend negotiations on June 20th. We followed up with efforts to obtain legal interpretation. We even went to the Labor Board. UB's position, which goes against all labor practices, is that more than 50% of our current industrial agreement falls under the purview of the Academic Senate, created under the UB Act, and they were not prepared to negotiate the same.
We met with Ms. Hepburn one-on-one for more insight.
We have at least 21 issues, and that's the ones that we're putting right forward to the general public. Like the reason we're in here right now, this is not my office, but it's raining from the lights in my office, so that's not a conducive atmosphere. And I'm even a part of the chair of the Health and Safety Committee. We're trying to get on that right now, but our director would tell you, who is in charge of health and safety, the biggest claim when she makes some of our concerns and our complaints known is there's no money. So another issue that we have is we'd like some fiscal responsibility and transparency, because it seems that the university could find money to spend things on what they want to, but not on things that needs to be done.
According to Hepburn, the union's giving UB's administration until December 7th to come to the table. You see, while these groups make efforts to bring their issues and concerns to the forefront, they find themselves in competition with their opposers. For example, Joey Gaskins and the LGBTQ community versus the Christian Council, or Stephanie St. Fleur and the Bahamian community versus what they describe as a xenophobic government. This is where the importance of the media kicks in.
Kenny, you giving this woman a jump again? So directly, I ain't have no juice for myself. Sweet girl, you need to carry that broke down car over to Epic, let them fix you up with a new battery. Kenny, one of these days, you gonna be way out west and you gonna need a jump. Then what you gonna do? Woman, relax yourself. Man, you too big, you know.
Ever producing instant current. Epic Batteries, with locations in Freeport, Nassau, Abaco, and Georgetown, Exuma. Epic Battery, the battery with the lightning bolt of life.
In this segment of the documentary, we're going to take a few minutes to discuss some of the views of the public on this democratic society that we live in, the Bahamas. What we want to show you is a short clip from the protest, the most recent protest that we had in Parliament Square, where hundreds of protesters came out to protest a number of issues that they have with the government right now. As you know, a very main part of democracy is the citizenry. So take a look at this video.
Peter Tank Wrestling, they get Jeff Floyd in charge of the country. Now, listen to me, let me be real now. If you want radical changes in the country, you need radical people. Because the people them, see when you come marching, right, the police know we saw. The politicians know we saw. If you see what's going on in Haiti, right, them people in Haiti don't play. When them people tell you in Haiti they can do something, they can do it. The Bahamas is just too passive. Now, it's a time for everything under the sun. Well, it's time for me to get a little wild and listen to me. Don't ever be my amen. Listen to me. Listen to me. Good. When the government of the Bahamas listen to the people should mass in mass numbers and show them what time it is.
Yes, sir.
You can't stay home and be a jellyback and don't say nothing. You gotta open up your mouth. Don't care who they is. They are the servants of the people.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The boss and that's the servant.
As you saw in the video, a lot of citizens showed up to Parliament Square expressing their concerns as they were very angry about some of the things that have been going on since this government took office. What are some of your views on how the public reacted?
Well, essentially, I think that a lot of persons are now angry because you have a government who came in making promises that they weren't going to now raise taxes, and now they're increasing the cost of living for everyone, and minimum wage is not even being increased. So how are these persons going to live, survive inside inner city? You know, if I put 12% on my food, how am I going to survive? If I have 6 or 7 children, how am I going to support them?
Now, do you think it's true democracy if you do voice your concerns, but there doesn't seem to be a resolution at the end of the day? Because that's what it seems like here.
Well, one of the things that, one of the activists spoke about in interviewing him, Joey Gaskins Jr., is that the public doesn't have an understanding of what it is exactly that these politicians have to deal with when they're there. They have to deal with, yes, they have constituents that put them there they have to deal with. They have their party that they have to deal with and the views of those party that you must be in line with. And we see what happens when you're not, like for those that got fired. And then they have supporters and people who sponsor their campaigns that they also, once again, have to make happy. So, and then they have their own personal views. So then you have all these different areas that you must try to make all these different people happy. So it's not that okay, I don't feel like power bills are too high and they need to come down. It's just that I gotta keep my party happy, I gotta keep the electorate happy, I have to keep, so it's more complex than just nothing's happening, you know?
One thing that I appreciate about the video that we just saw is that it shows what democracy actually is, and that's when a community of people exercise their self-determination. And beyond that, it also is a system of government that is transparent, that is participatory, and that also has public accountability. And in this moment, in that video, we saw the public actually holding the government accountable. But is the government being transparent is the next part of what democracy is. I don't think that's happening inside this democratic society right now.
Well, I can say that Well, for years now, in terms of governments, I don't think government has ever really been transparent in the Bahamas.
No.
However, what I can appreciate on the side of the government is that the Prime Minister acknowledged that this is a democratic society and the people have the right to do that. What they did as a democratic nation. As well as, Pine Jumpy Pine, he was also there advocating for them, saying that...
How do you guys feel about that? Because he's showing that he's not essentially with his party. He's saying he's with the people, but now he's kind of going against his party.
Well, Pine, if you ask him, is a little confused, because at one point, not confused, but confusing in the terms of, and then the FNM chairman said the same thing, because 1 minute he's saying that he supports Minutes, he supports his party, he supports all that, but then again he's like he's for the people.
Is it not his democratic right to express these things openly, though?
And also representing a constituency where those in his constituency have some issues with the government, he's going to have to stand behind them. That's the people he represents.
Well, then your stand should be then that I'm against the government, because at this point the people are against the government.
In terms of transparency, though, sorry. Okay. During campaigning, the FNM said that one of the first things that they were going to implement was the Freedom of Information Act. Has that been implemented?
It has yet to be
implemented. So is there transparency?
Well, there are a number of things the government actually said they were going to do that they wouldn't do. We're still waiting on Minutes to have his press briefing with the media. That has yet to happen, where he's to update the media on things that they asked him. We're still waiting on the investigation that should have been launched into BPL. That hasn't been happening yet.
He also promised free tuition, but here we are, tuition spiked up.
Okay, so let's stray away from pointing fingers now. Let's get back to democracy. When it comes to the way our democratic society operates and the government operates in terms of us as citizens exercising our right to democracy, such as through voting and some referendums sometimes, do you think we would be able to properly demonstrate more democracy within our society if we were able to have direct democracy within the laws and stuff that are passed in government, rather than them throwing us 1-2 little referendums here and there just to make us feel as if we have some type of direct impact on the democracy process?
Well, I think to answer that, there are two things that I think that comes into play. One, when a politician or a member of parliament, you should be having, I guess, annual meetings or some time allotted where your constituents can come to and express concerns about whatever issues that they have. And then the media then should also, as the fourth estate, plays a role as that link between government and the people. They provide a platform for the people to express their concerns, like they do for a number of these activists, where they can express their concerns as well as the concerns of others, as well as, I guess, give or show the government that this is where we stand and this is what we want, which happened at that march. They showed the government this is where we stand and this is what we want. Now it's up to the government to be receptive of that and to act on the demands or the requests of the people.
I don't think that march was enough to actually invoke change within government. Previously, we've seen in history like the General Strike March, where they shut down the entire capital. Marches like those actually invoke change, but a march like the Freedom March that we've just experienced, that did not invoke change.
Okay, so we're going to take a break right now. We're going to come back and we're going to continue to discuss how democracy is at work in our country.
This year has been so hard for me. People just don't understand me. They don't get it anymore.
According to the World Health Organization, approximately 1 million people die from suicide every year.
In the Bahamas, over 400 people attempted to commit suicide between 2011 and 2012 alone.
It is important to note that over the years, those numbers have increased tremendously.
It's important that we look out for our loved ones who may become prone to suicidal thoughts.
Any talks of suicide, dying, or self-harm should be taken seriously.
When things are tough, you must be tougher.
Show them that your life can be
prove them wrong.
This message was brought to you by UB TV.
Not only do these human rights groups push for equality, but they also help push for democracy in the Bahamas itself. Our Anisha Jones tells us what exactly that they help with.
The action of activism involves door-to-door canvassing, alternative radio, public meetings, rallies, and even fasting. This segment of this documentary will dive deeper into these activists and activist groups and how they contribute to democracy.
In this interview, Bethel says that she personally believes in social justice and democracy and doesn't think either of them are being achieved. She explains how she, as an activist, helps democracy.
I've taken stands about it. I have gone on the air and talked about it. I even participated in We March, but that's not unusual because many people participated in We March. But I also teach it in my classes. So I guess that's why people see me as an activist, largely because of the stands I take in public.
In addition to her personal contributions to democracy, her primary way of contributing is her written pieces.
Well, I guess the most recent one was the question of democracy and the question of the way in which I believe that the electorate is treated by the political parties and by the system in general, the system that exists right now in terms of democratic participation, which is limited by custom, but also by system, to a vote cast every 5 years. And it's a single vote for 70% of the population. 70% of the population of the Bahamas does not get to vote in more than one election for representatives that make a difference in their lived realities. And that is not democratic because the people that are put forward to represent them do not represent the population. The people put forward to represent them represent their political parties. They are nominated behind closed doors. There's no way to vet them. There's no way for the public to weigh in on them. They're nominated behind closed doors. They're assigned, it appears from the outside, at random to different constituencies. The primary consideration is generally strategic and partisan, and their primary responsibility very often seems to be to the party rather than to the electorate. And so I protested that in my own particular way during the last election with a campaign that we called Out the Box 242, which was a campaign to say that you don't have to cast your ballot for anybody. People misinterpreted it and said that we were advocating that people spoil their ballots. That was not necessarily what we were advocating for. That was what we had chosen to do. But we were trying to raise the consciousness of the Bahamian electorate to say that if you don't have any say in the people who are put before you to represent you, you don't have to pick any of them.
Cavante Cash participated in the Out the Box campaign and expresses how groups and organizations like these foster the democratic process.
But even with that, when we get into that conversation, I was a part of the campaign with Nicolette Bethel and Alicia Wallace, Spoil the Ballot, right? I'm not going to expose whether I spoiled my ballot or not, but I truly believed in everything that Alicia Wallace, Dr. Ian Strawn, and Dr. Nicolette Bethel were advocating for, practicing full and complete democracy. Like, everything that campaign stood for, I was behind. So in that sense, you need passionate academics that could bring the word to people that may not be in a sense of what we consider to be progressive, bring that message to them to let them know, listen, like, if you have not been satisfied over the last 5 years, and you're not satisfied with the other options, you don't have to vote for any of these people, like, at all. So in that regard, and then taking into consideration the fact that NGOs exist, they give you the space and the freedom to express the things that you are most passionate about, whether it be women's rights, LGBT rights, immigration, or anything like that. You have people advocating for wellness and all these bunch of different things. Like, they give you the space to kind of like bring up these issues, one, in social spaces, when you host in forums, or just community center gatherings or engagements, and then they make it a point where they could take these issues to the people of the government and just make them aware of the things that are happening, what it is that the people are talking about now.
A part of democracy is the free press. Berthany McDermott tells us how the media helps assist with democracy in the Bahamas.
The media plays a crucial role in any democratic society. It assists in shaping the society and brings awareness to social, political, and economic issues that are occurring within the country. There are four main roles of the media. These roles are facilitative, monitorial, radical, and collaborative. The facilitative role of the media is most appropriate as it relates to these activists, as it gives them the platform to express their concerns as well as the concerns of others. Human rights activist Joey Gaskin says the media has done just that.
They like to print my writing, and they put me on television, so in a way they created space for me to have these conversations. I think one of the most amazing things about the media is that it's populated with young people and millennials, and if you look at stations like Eyewitness News and Our News, it's the young people who are leading the way. They're all around my age or younger than me, which means that I think they come to the table with similar kinds of perspectives. Now, reporters and journalists have a duty, I guess, to be non-biased about these kinds of things, right? And to present the facts as they are. And to be, as Fox News would say, fair and balanced.
The agenda-setting theory states that the media doesn't tell you what to think, but it tells you what to think about. With that said, the media, as the Fourth Estate, is obligated to be objective. Gaskin said he has an agenda and he makes his agenda known.
I have an agenda, and I make that agenda very clear. And I think I have the right agenda, and I challenge anybody to challenge my agenda. And it's in the space in that debate that is constructive and that good work happens. Because when you get an opportunity to go face to face with, like I said, some of the preconceived notions, the stereotypes, the false beliefs that people carry around with them and beat each other over the head with, and you bring that stuff to battle, right? And you come across folks who are educated, engaged, and have their agenda and willing to battle you with that, then you see how those arguments, that reasoning falls apart.
In providing a platform for a wide variety of persons, advocate Cavante Cash says 55 to 65% of her advocacy work is done in the media. She adds that the media helps in bolstering democracy in the Bahamas as well.
For sure. Just the fact that they keep going out every single day to just find the answers to the questions that people want to know for their betterment and their development as citizens that are supposed to be residing within a democratic society. I honestly, I feel like their efforts kind of go unappreciated. It is kind of underrated. I don't think that journalists, or maybe some journalists do, but I don't think the average journalist would consider themselves to be advocates, but I think that they are.
While she says that the media helps democracy, Cash said that in recent times, the government has made attempts to put the media down, or as she said, silence the media.
Recently, I've been paying attention to how the government has been kind of like responding to the media. The media is the fourth estate, which means, you know, the voice of the people that put you in power. And I kind of think like how ministers of the government have been treating the media is kind of like silencing our voices in that sense. And I don't know, I just kind of got frustrated every time I see the PM, the journalists want to ask the PM questions about things that matter, you know what I mean? Things that the people are concerned about. And you saying not today, and you sending like your aid to like shut people down. That's like kind of like silencing our voices. And in a sense, I find that to be very trivial, and I find that to be very questionable, because it's like, if you don't have time for journalists, you don't have time for your people.
Now, while these persons spoke highly of the relationship between the media and their different streams of activism, Stephanie Saint-Fleur says the media can be both helpful and harmful, more specifically in the portrayal of certain stories.
The media can be helpful and both harmful. The media, to me, can play a better role as far as educating our people in this country on human rights. Because I asked the cameraman, I say, growing up in the Bahamas, did you guys know anything about human rights? Did you grow up knowing anything about human rights? Did you? Yeah. You did? Yeah. Fortunate. Yeah. But the majority of us, you know, coming from Baintown or East Street or Camp Road or whatever, where most of these violations are taking place, because it wouldn't be out west or behind the gates. It'll be in our urban areas. We didn't grow up knowing these things, you know? So like I say, in some cases where the media could be harmful, it depends on the way they portray things and they send out these stories. you know, with the shantytown issue, and then you have the John Ronnie issue, and then you have education. Like when they send out things that are a lot of people don't read. A lot of our people really don't read. So it will be based now, today, 2018 in the Bahamas. Most people get secondhand information. It's more like via WhatsApp and, you know, voice notes. Yeah. So that's where it's very harmful, especially when people are sending out fake news. It's very harmful.
Now, while the media does have a positive and a negative effect on activism as well as many other areas in the Bahamas, it does provide a platform for persons to express their concerns. Gaskin said that he only asks that the media does this so that he can have the space to advocate for persons who cannot advocate for themselves.
And so all I really ask the media to do is give me the space to speak and give people like me the space to speak, because politicians get the space all the time. And quite frankly, a lot of them don't know what they're talking about. They're intellectually incurious people, right? And they use the platitudes and stereotypes and the things that appeal to our basest desires to whip up votes. We know that. And I'm not even gonna get into pastors for fear of offending people who still go to church. Right? I mean, particularly in a place where colonialism, right, has brought this white Jesus to us, and then you can turn around and look at your black neighbors and tell them get on board or go to hell. Like, and these pastors, right, they literally stand in the podium and beat up the people in the community, take your money, build a big house, and never look back. These are the people who get to speak the loudest in our society, and that is unfair because they're not the smartest people. And they're not the people who care about the most vulnerable in our society either. So there needs to be a space created for those people who want to advocate to that, to challenge those folks, to advocate on behalf of the people who don't have voices for themselves. And more importantly, not to speak for people, but to help create spaces where those people can speak for themselves. And I think the media gives me my space. My job then is to bring in the voices of people who I can't speak for, because I don't know what it's like to go to the pump and pump water. I grew up in Freeport. I always had water running from the faucet, good water that you could drink. You know what I mean? My job is to use that space and leverage that for people so they can tell their own stories, so that they can translate their own needs and desires and their own vision for the community in which they live.
Now, usually, traditional media will play a big role in democracy. However, citizens have now taken journalism into their own hands. Our reporter Kenton Hebron meets with Graham Weatherford to help explain how social media has helped him in the past.
Citizen journalism plays a significant role in promoting and preserving a thriving democracy. It allows ordinary citizens to collect, report, analyze, and disseminate news and information with a device like this. Graham Weatherford is one such individual who uses these tools to advocate for his causes.
I realized that social media is more powerful than traditional media. The TV, the newspaper, the radio, they're on the way out.
Weatherford uses his social media platform on Facebook and appearances on talk shows to promote a more progressive, forward, and digitized Bahamas.
This device here reaches more people in my country than any other traditional type TV, internet, or radio. But I still have appeared on radio, make appearances on radio and on TV with Clint Watson. I want to say hello to Clint Watson beyond the headlines, because there is certain people that do watch those devices. You know, the country's not all young people, right? It has some seniors. There's a small percentage. It's irrelevant when it comes to voting because we go by numbers, majority rule. But that small percentage, they have children and grandchildren. So I want to reach them as well.
But how exactly does citizen journalism promote democracy? It helps promote democracy by giving ordinary citizens the tools they need to freely express their thoughts, concerns, and opinions. This can be seen in the increasing rate of information being shared through WhatsApp, Facebook, and blog pages. Weatherford uses his platform to encourage citizens to use solar panels as a means to significantly decrease their electricity bills.
You can get the message out to you, right? That you don't have to pay a light bill, right? The last prime minister said it before election, but everybody thought that free electricity was a joke. Free electricity is not a joke. The last prime minister's house, if you drive out there and you take a video, it's got lone solar, and his electricity is free from that solar. So if he took a loan, it paid for itself. A few years, you paid off the loan, now you're getting free electricity. It's just unfortunate it was said in the 5th year and not in the 1st year.
Weatherford also took us on a short tour of his business establishment to show us the benefits of solar and how it works. All right, so Graham, can you explain to us the solar panel process? What do you use it for?
Yeah, so we got 2 types of solar. One is called off of the grid, and one is called grid tie. This one is off of the grid, no connection to the power company at all. And we'll show you that on the inside. The one that you had seen on the roof, and I'll get you a picture, that one is tied with the gray wire directly to the grid. There's no batteries. And that's the one we need in this country. We don't really want to have a battery environment problem, right? Because you got to dispose of those. So the grid tie, when the sun's out, you use the sun. When the sun's not out, you use the power company. But if you have more solar panels than you're using in the day or you're not home, your meter goes backwards, so you get the credit. So tonight when you come home, it goes forwards. When there's no sun, you get less bill.
Unlike newspapers and television or radio broadcasts, the internet and social media has created instant access to information, therefore fulfilling the monitorial role of media. This role of media serves to inform and educate the public so that they can make well-informed decisions.
Because my mother is in her 80s, and every day at 2 o'clock she picks up her computer, tablet, and she reads the newspapers. So she's using digital to go and see analog. Now, if she was on enough WhatsApp pages and Facebook pages, she would see the news before it was printed. But she still wants to see what they're publishing, because there's certain things that politicians put in papers that they don't put on social media. But the young people are now taking the papers and digitizing it and throwing it in social media. So it's evolving.
Although citizen journalism is considered a threat by many, it helps provide an independent source of information that is needed for a healthy democracy. This can be seen in the plane accident involving Byron Ferguson on Love Beach. It was here at Montague Beach where head nodes used social media to gather persons. This resulted in pieces of the downed plane being found and Byron Ferguson's flight plan. Despite this constant access to information, photos, and videos, Weatherford also explains that citizen journalism can sometimes harm persons if not used properly.
Internet is going to be something that you can be reckless on if you wish, but we still know it's you. So while there's no digital laws here, and we can't really prosecute you on the digital side, we can come after you on the slander and libel, because we know it was you, and you said this about her. So you still have to be respectful. Like I could say some bad things about you, right? Sexual content. And then everybody will want to kill you because you did that to that young lady, that minor. You didn't even do it. And then they come and attack you physically. So that's where it could be harmful, correct? If it's made up. So you gotta be very, I guess you gotta be careful with it. It's a tool. You gotta be somewhat responsible.
He also adds that the initiatives that he pushes for does not suit the interest of the elite.
Everything that I speak to actually takes power away from centralized governments. I believe in giving the resources of the country to the people, not to the government. So government's not gonna want that. I believe in getting rid of light bills. Big oil is not gonna like that. Big oil may donate to governments. So everything that I speak of is not what they want to hear or do.
When asked about the state of democracy in the Bahamas, Weatherford suggested,
I want everyone watching this to download, go to Google, and type in Constitution of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I want you to Google that and read the first paragraph. The power is vested in Her Majesty the Queen. Did it say the people? And everybody swears to the Queen, her heirs and successors. So when you say democracy, you've got 38 people that have sworn to a queen. I think we should change that oath to swear to the Bahamian people and their children, not to the Queen and her grandchildren. So you have to decide. We say we're independent, so let's remove that from our Constitution. Let's have a referendum to remove the Queen being the head of the state.
At such a young age, I've been able to advocate for students, influence university policy, and make a real change at UB.
I love music because music loves me back. Music has given so much to me, and I just want to give something to it.
I'm an entrepreneur because I believe it's the only way that you can control your life and become fully responsible for the actions you make and all of the money that you want to make.
I decided to run for politics because I wanted to champion the cause for change for my community and young people of our country.
The reason I am an advocate is because I believe that service is the rent that you pay for your room here on earth. This is my story.
Our age does not limit our potential.
This is our story. What's yours?
So welcome back to our discussion on democracy in the Bahamas. Our Leah Cooper had to leave as she is fulfilling her role as a journalist in this democratic society. But now in this segment, we want to talk about some issues that stood out to us in interviewing our various activists.
Well, in my interview, what stood out the most to me was how she said the media portrays Haitian migrants, you know. The media constantly refers to them as illegal migrants. How can a person be illegal, you know? That what they do is illegal, but the person themselves is not illegal.
No, it's the act that's illegal. That's why it should be called illegal migration and not illegal immigrants.
Right.
And we have to be careful as journalists that we don't that we uphold the social responsibility to be objective reporters, and oftentimes we see media houses not being objective, and they're pushing for their agenda. And agenda setting really tells us that the media doesn't tell us what to think, but they do tell us what to think about, and that's why they begin to portray Haitians the way that they portray them, because the government agenda, especially ZNS, is to carry out a certain role in immigration reform, and that has been done from the 1950s. We see how immigration officers get the pat on the back after they send the Haitian away, and ZNS offers a platform to people to do just that, call them names like nasty and dirty, uneducated, poor group of people.
Scattered, captured. They treat them as if they're animals.
And not only with professional journalism, but citizen journalism as well, because they can spread wrong information and make them seem like these persons are terrible and are a drain to our society. So.
I mean, well, the traditional media has been pushing that agenda down our throat for the last, 40 plus years. Then, of course, a lot of society is now going to have the same mindset. So when they produce their own news, they're going to continue to push what they have already accustomed to.
Well, one of the other issues that stood out to me when I was interviewing Joey Gaskins Jr., he mentioned about equality and how, you know, he stands up for the rights of women and LGBTQ plus people. He mentioned that in the Bahamas, as he knew it, is a very inclusive kind of community-based type of society, but what Bahamians tend to do is they tend to try to choose who is inclusive in that society, and that is not democracy. It's not that community-based that the Bahamas is said to be, when you choose that you are a part of this community because you're like everyone else, but because you're different, you're not, especially in a society where you pay taxes, you contribute to the public purse, you know, you do everything that a regular citizen does, so why does that make you, what puts you outside of that circle? You know, that's not democracy.
And that's the thing about a lot of minority groups in this democratic society. They aren't included in the discussions that we have that aims towards political reform, the legislative reform in the country. But further, let's talk about how citizen journalism in the country is now bolstering or destroying democracy in the society.
Well, if we piggyback off of the equality with Joey, Kevante Cash, who I interviewed, she spoke about the LGBT community as well as it relates to the referendum in when was that?
I believe that was in 2012.
2012, however, I think they had another one back in
Yeah, they had two. They had several.
They had another one.
20
That's what I'm saying. I think another one was in like 2006 or somewhere around there.
Yeah, 20-something.
But she said even though sometimes these minority groups may not be involved in the discussion, when the discussion does come up, she believes that democracy is exemplified because they allow the space for them to express their views. Because with the last referendum, the LGBT community, they came out and they allowed them to express their opinions and everything, even though the public was then misinformed because citizen journalists, those on social media then, misconstrued the message and made it about what it was not. However, the rights of the citizens and their ability to promote or, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, bolster democracy was that they were able to come out, and people who didn't agree as well still were able to show that form of democracy by expressing their views. There wasn't any sort of discrimination when it came to what the media was able to, whatever I'm saying. But yeah.
And in addition to that, right, Anisha, we can also see where citizen journalism actually helps democracy by fulfilling the monitoring role of media. Let's look at the incident with Byron Ferguson and the plane crash. We have it on news interviews where the Minister for National Security is saying that he has no flight plans. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force saying that they stopped search efforts. But we have one person using social media, gathering Gina Knowles, the head Knowles, using social media to gather these persons, finding these down plane pieces, and actually proving that what the minister said was wrong. He actually did have a flight plan.
So it's safe to say that
citizen journalists in that case also destroyed democracy as well, because Bahamas Press also concurred with the Minister of National Security, saying that it did not. This person did not have their flight plan. So we see how citizen journalism not only destroys, but it also helps democracy, and I think that is important.
So it's safe to say that citizen journalism acts as a double sword.
It does.
It does, definitely.
A double-edged sword.
Besides that confusion, with the Out of the Box campaign that Nicolette Bethel was a part of, their goal was not to have people destroy their ballots, but just saying that there are other alternatives in the voting process. Right. So we see how citizen journalism always misconstrues a message, and sometimes it can also be helpful. But I think that's journalism, and sometimes a lot of media houses don't get it right. But how do you correct that issue is the question.
Well, it's a different, what's the word I'm looking for? You're upheld at a different accountability level, So I expect the Guardian, the Tribune, our news editors, I expect them to come with me with the facts. I don't expect some average Joe to have everything right, if you get what I'm saying.
I agree.
Okay, so what we're gonna do, guys, is I want us to basically, in a short little sentence, do you think, from our interviews and from our knowledge, where does the Bahamas stand in being a democratic country right now?
I think it's. I think I had a discussion with one of my colleagues who's actually studying in journalism that we need to redefine what democracy actually is, because the Constitution is saying one thing, as Graham mentioned inside his interview, Nicolette Bethel said that there's also there's some gaps in what democracy actually is in the country, because we have persons being elected behind closed doors for constituencies, and the public is not involved in the decision making totally. So we need to go back to the drawing board and actually say whether this country is actually a democratic country or not in its entirety. There are some elements of democracy that's there, but there are some elements of democracy that's absolutely missing.
I agree with Joshua. I see where the Bahamas, sometimes they get it right with all the process that goes with being a democratic society, and then I see where we lack it sometimes. So we really need to redefine what is democracy in the Bahamas,
I agree with Lauren. I have no alternatives.
And definitely, I think that we also have to really watch the state of democracy, because in a few instances you would have seen where the Prime Minister and his aide would blatantly disrespect and disregard
the media.
So I think that we have to really be careful and really do our job properly in order to ensure that democracy stays alive and inspired.
Well, as we conclude, I would like to, well, what we are left with is the question of, is this country that we live in truly a democratic society? And as we move forward, we understand, and as we did in our research, we understand that yes, there are aspects of this country that say that this is a democratic nation, as well as there are certain points that be like, wow, this is not democratic, yet these things are happening in our country. But as young media people coming up, as the fourth estate, we will do our endeavor best to ensure that our democratic society stays innately democratic. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.